Good afternoon. Today is March 16th, 2010. We are here at California University of Pennsylvania, in California, Pennsylvania, to record the oral history of a woman of accomplishment, Annie Malkowiak. This oral history is being filmed by the Department of Communication Studies under the direction of Assistant Professor James Carter, and this is a first in a series of oral histories for the CalU Women of Accomplishment, an oral history project. This is a collaboration between the Women's Center Peace Project and the Library of Congress Teaching with Primary Sources Center for Oral History. The purpose of the CalU Women of Accomplishment, an oral history project is to collect and preserve the oral histories of California University of Pennsylvania of alumni who have achieved notable accomplishments. The project is intended to preserve women's legacies, communicate their stories, and inspire future generations of CalU students and other women to pursue worthy and noble goals. The project will capture women's perspectives and their interpretations of the social, cultural, and political influences of their times. Of particular interest will be how attending California University of Pennsylvania shaped and enhanced their lives and contributed to their development as professionals and citizens. We have with us today Annie Malkowiak, and welcome today, Annie.
Thank you, Michael.
Such a pleasure to have you here.
Same here, thanks.
And as I say, Annie is a woman of accomplishment, and her accomplishments are so broad-based that it could take up the entire interview, so I've tried to narrow them down a bit and just give you some background, just to give you some idea of the notable accomplishments that she's achieved, beginning with some of the firsts in Annie's life. Annie was the first female on an all-boys basketball team in grade school. In her high school days at Elwood City, she was the first female or male to score 2,000 points in Beaver County. She was the first female athlete at Elwood City High School to have her high school uniform retired. She was the first MVP of the first Pennsylvania Roundball Classic in 1989. Some of her CalU firsts include the first single-season percentage record for three-point shots, 43.5%. First all-time career percentage record for three-point shots, 37.8%. First all-time single-season record for free throws, an amazing 84.9%. And she was the first female public address announcer for CalU sports, including baseball, football, and women's basketball and softball. And let me share with you some of her awards, honors, and accomplishments as well, besides her firsts. Annie has been inducted into 3 Hall of Fames. She is in the Lawrence County Hall of Fame, was inducted in 2000, the same year that she was inducted into California University of Pennsylvania's Hall of Fame. And in 2007, she was honored to be inducted into the Pennsylvania Basketball Hall of Fame. And the notable accomplishment about that is there are very few women that were inducted into that. That is generally a majority of men who belong to that Hall of Fame. So that was a very impressive mark. She's been the winner of at least 9 MVP awards. I probably came up short when I was counting. Athlete or Player of the Week dozens of times. A number of outstanding athletic and academic achievement awards. So not only is she a great basketball player, she's a bright lady. In 1998, Annie received the John R. Gregg Award for Loyalty and Service from the CalU Alumni Association, a distinguished award presented by the CalU Alumni Association every year. She was the WPIAL scoring leader from 1985 to 1989 with 2,368 points. She set the Elwood City High School single-season scoring record with 773 points. She set the Elwood City career free throw percentage record at an amazing, incredible 93%. And she was the 8th player in CalU history to surpass the 1,000-point plateau. And she once scored 59 points in a 72-59 win over Beaver High School in 1989, which means she scored herself as many points as the opposing team. And the rest of her teammates only scored 13 points to add to that night. And the list goes on and on. And so you can see by those accomplishments and those awards and those honors that she certainly is a woman of accomplishment. But she has much more in her life than just her basketball accomplishments. We're going to begin today by having Annie please tell us your name and what year you were born and where you were born.
Annie Malkowiak. I was born 1971 in actually Newcastle, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Which is a little north of Elwood City.
Okay.
About 10-15 minutes.
And did you grow up there?
Nope, just the hospital at the time. That was the closest hospital to Elwood City. So instead of driving to Pittsburgh, Mom and Dad just went up to Newcastle.
Okay.
I think it was Jameson Hospital in Newcastle, PA.
Okay. And so the community you grew up in was?
Elwood City.
Okay.
It's actually not a very big community. It's just kind of a small community. It's kind of in between Newcastle and Beaver Falls.
Okay. And tell us a little more about that community. What kind of a community is that? What kind of economy and politics?
Elwood City was kind of like the Beaver Falls area, a steel mill community. Most of the people who lived there traveled down to the valley, as we call it, the Beaver Valley, to work in the steel mills. My parents moved there. My dad actually worked for a MetLife life insurance for over 35 years. And my parents came in from the Natrona Heights, Freeport area, and they moved to Elwood City because my dad got a job down in Beaver Falls. So it was only about a 15-minute commute. So I guess when you talk to them, they chose that area because very family-oriented. A lot of communities with kids, the playground, the recreational area, took a liking to the school district. So yeah, they kind of just plopped right there, and they've been there ever since. Mom and Dad have lived there now for 48 years.
48 years.
40 years, still live there.
Wonderful,
so, yeah.
Wonderful.
It's a nice little community. It's very family-oriented, and it's one of those places, the cost of living is just right. There's just enough to do. You're close enough to Pittsburgh. You're close enough to Cranberry, you know, for different things.
Right.
Now it's actually becoming more of a retirement community. You'll see a lot of people who retire from their jobs wanting to move there because it's just a nice, friendly, quiet place to be.
And I would imagine most of the kids have grown up now.
Most of the kids have grown up. Sometimes it's funny when you go home, and right outside of my parents' house, very convenient, is the playground that has 2 full-court basketball courts. And when I come home, I'm sometimes amazed at the lack of people who are out there, because when I was growing up, between the ball field and the basketball courts and the playground, from sun up to sundown, it's just kids after kids after kids, and now it's very quiet. So I think that gives you a sense of more older folk and less kids in the neighborhood.
Right, right. Yeah. And brothers, sisters?
I have 2 brothers. I have one brother who lives in Minneapolis, and I have a younger brother who's actually a traveling nurse. Right now he's here in the Pittsburgh area working.
Okay.
So I'm the middle child.
You're the middle child.
I am the middle spoiled child because I'm the only girl.
I'm
Daddy's little girl.
Good for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good for you. That's a nice place to be.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm spoiled.
You're spoiled.
Yeah, definitely.
And so it sounds like your family must have nurtured some sort of achievement or success factor. It sounds like the 3 of you have accomplished and done well. So were your parents influential in guiding you along your path to those kinds of values and virtues that would lead you to success?
Oh, absolutely. And you figure, you know, my mom's dad always worked in the steel mill, so you know, hardworking. My dad was the same way. My dad was in the Army, so he had that work ethic instilled in him, and he grew up on a farm. So you know, up early,
right.
You know, that kind of work ethic. And you know, my mom, neither one of them ever had the opportunity to go to college. You know, my mom, I think, was I believe my mom was the valedictorian of her class.
Okay.
But went on to, she used to work in downtown Pittsburgh at the Oliver Building.
Okay.
Actually secretarial work and things of that nature. And then had 3 kids. So chose the life that most people could back then, was stay home mom and raise 3 kids. Dad worked. But she was a hardworking mom. You know, and it was always, with us, you hit a certain age, it was always instilled in you, nothing is given to you, nothing is handed to you, you work for everything you get.
Okay.
You know, we were always the kind of kids who got those awards in high schools that most people laugh about. You never missed a class. I don't know, the absentee award, you never missed a day of school.
Right.
So yeah, so I have 2 very hardworking parents. Even after we got to a certain age, my mom took odds and ends jobs just to give us the kind of life that you know, for me to be able to go to basketball camp.
Sure.
Mom would work. I think she started her own cake decorating business, just so I could have the life of. She knew I liked basketball so much. Well, in order to get better at it or get recognized, because Elwood City is so small,
right.
She would do things like that so that I could go to camp in Ohio or Michigan or somewhere like that. So yeah, I have 2 very hardworking folks.
Now, was that typical of the parents in the neighborhood? Were they all pretty much nuclear in that respect, where the mother stays at home, and they seem to have very traditional roles from the way you're describing it?
Traditional is definitely the word. Yeah, because you know we all went to Catholic school. I went to Catholic grade school up until 7th grade.
Okay.
I didn't go in 8th grade, and it was only because they started a basketball team at the high school, 7th and 8th grade, so they were yanking me to come out of Catholic school, and
right.
we always joke, go to the other side. But yeah, and you know, because my mom didn't work at the time, you don't ever say they don't work, because being a stay-at-home mom's work.
Yes, it is.
You would always find her and all the other mothers of the kids that I went to Catholic school with volunteering all of their time, whether it was, you know, lunch duty or just special duties within the school, within the community. So my mom especially was very active with the Catholic school that we were involved in.
Okay. Okay, and you mentioned basketball courts in the neighborhood. Sounds like they were very close to your home there.
I think I walk out the back door.
That was
yeah, it's in our backyard.
Is it?
And people laugh, and they're like, no wonder. And that's what's so great. And we come home, there's a week in the summertime, usually around the 4th of July, where I usually have a big 4th of July party for all my friends, and my brother brings the kids home and his wife for that week, and we still go out into that backyard and play, and at that playground, and it's funny, we'll sit out there and talk about all the times we had, because we laugh. If it wasn't for those 2 basketball courts, I really probably never would have been a decent basketball player, because I was the only girl that played.
Okay.
It was packed, especially Saturday morning, 8:30 in the morning, you hear that ball bounce, and you would walk out the door, and there you are. Convenient for mom, look out the window, make sure the kids are okay, but she always knew where we were.
Right.
So it was extremely convenient to have that court there.
Now, did your brother, your older brother, was he the one that got you involved in basketball, or is that just something
No.
something?
It was actually my dad.
Your dad?
You know, we had that playground out there, and we'd go out, and we'd joke. And I think my Hall of Fame speech, when I got inducted into Cal, we joked, because when I grew up, there weren't any Barbie dolls. There weren't any doll houses.
Okay.
It was, you're the all-time quarterback. I'm going to show you how to play dice baseball.
Okay.
You know, you're going to come outside and play basketball. You know, you're going to learn how to play, I don't even know what they call it now, stickball or home run derby, things like that.
Right.
And my dad was out there playing with my brother. I got started around 6 or 7, just out throwing the ball up. And it was my dad who pushed me to do it. You know, he saw it as an opportunity for something.
Okay.
And I think when I was about 7, 8, my dad and mom got me involved in the Elks Club. They used to have a they called it a hoop shoot contest. It was just
Okay.
free throw shooting contest.
Right.
So I did that from the time I was 7 till the time I was 14.
Okay.
And we traveled all around Pennsylvania and the country, actually, getting involved in free throw shooting contests. And obviously, the better you were, the more you advanced to the national championship. So that's kind of how it got started.
So did he start it for you as because he saw a particular talent in you, or just because he wanted you to have some activity that you said that would create an opportunity for a woman that maybe she would not have had?
I think then it was just get me to be active, and then he saw me shoot, and he was like, oh man, there's something here. It was just kind of natural.
Okay.
You know how some people are just naturally gifted at different things? My dad saw it as, I have a pretty athletic daughter. Let's try this.
Okay.
So, you know, then it was basketball, then it was, no, I don't want you playing softball, let's go play baseball.
Right.
You know, so anything the boys were doing, my dad was proud. I got a girl that can do that.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, I started playing baseball until till Colt League. Once I got through Pony League, the guys were like, "That's enough. We don't want her anymore. She has to go to softball now."
Is that right?
Oh, yeah, I got kicked out of a lot. When I was in Catholic school, and they didn't have a girls' team at the time, and I was 5'6", and Sean Miller.
Right.
I think everybody knows who he is.
Sure,
He coaches Arizona now. He was 2 years. He was in 8th grade. I was in 6th grade, and he went to our Catholic school. And the coach at the time was, okay, we want you to play. 'Cause I was pretty big.
Right.
So I remember I played on the boys team with him for a couple years. And I still remember to this day going down. It was in the Beaver Valley. I can't think of the name. I think it was, I don't know if it was St. Titus, but the priests and the nuns blocked the door. They didn't want me in. They thought it was just ridiculous that a girl was playing boys basketball.
Really?
So it was a chore to get in the door to play that game.
How did you get in?
I think my dad and some of the other dads kind of overpowered the priests and we worked our way in.
Right.
But yeah, it was a struggle sometimes.
So resistance even from the establishment, even at the earliest days,
Sure.
not even just your peers. And by the way, how did your peers, the boy, when I say your peers, the male athletes, how did they accept you as a basketball player?
You know what? And it's so funny now because of Facebook. I still have those guys they're my friends on Facebook.
Okay.
And we talk about that now. We just had our high school reunion last summer, and I never met any resistance from them. I think there was a couple of guys that were jealous, you know,
Sure.
because all the girls playing over me.
Right.
But I was good enough at what I was doing, and we were winning. I think they didn't care, you know. But we always laugh. They always got their locker room. I always had a change in the hallway.
Sure.
You know, why does she have to wear a T-shirt under her, you know, uniform and things like that? But you met more resistance from the parents than you did the guys that I played with.
Okay.
Because in some ways I don't think they knew any different.
Right.
But the parents were kind of the ones that would give a hard time. But then after a while, I think it just grew on them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I think sometimes my parents, if there was something wrong, because I was a kid, they just kept it from me and dealt with it like mom and dads would.
Right, right.
But we met some resistance.
Yeah. And so did you feel a certain sense of accomplishment that you were able to overcome that barrier? And was that a prideful thing for you to be able to, not prideful in a way that's haughty, but proud that you were able to compete and realizing and understanding that you had this kind of a real challenge in front of you playing with males, and yet you were able to overcome that and win them over. Was that an important thing for you? Did you see it as that at all, or did you just see it as playing basketball?
I think back then, I don't even think kids, we didn't pay attention to that kind of stuff.
Okay.
I just took it as, I was so used to that kind of atmosphere because in our neighborhood there was always more boys than girls, and I had two brothers that I think I almost was accustomed to that from the playground and playing with my brothers all the time, and taken to their activities. And I also just realized that I really took a liking to basketball, and if I didn't play with the boys, that I wasn't going to play. So I just kind of did it. I kind of had that attitude where I really didn't know what was going on. I didn't know any better. I didn't know any different.
Right.
So to me, that was the norm.
Okay.
Until they started girls basketball.
Okay.
Because even when we went to hoop shoot contests, my parents would tell me, no, you shoot against the girls, because I even wanted to compete against the boys there.
Right.
Because, you know, people always instill that in your head too, well, boys are better than girls.
Right.
Boys are bigger, they're stronger, they're faster. And my mentality was, well, no, they're not.
Okay.
But I had to learn that I had to go with the girls at some point and break away from the boys.
Okay, but you didn't mind having that competitive bent with them, just you
I like that because it was competitive too.
Right,
And I think
right.
that's truly, I remember when I graduated from high school, there was a guy who was a sports writer for our local newspaper. And our local paper at home was really good to me personally. And they always did a senior article on the kids from Riverside High School, which was really close, in Elwood City. And I remember the guy that did the article, or helped with the article, was a kid who grew up right down the street from us and who played with us on that basketball court every day in the summertime. Then I said, if it wasn't for you guys, there's no doubt I wouldn't have been any good in high school, and I wouldn't have had a full ride to college or the accolades or been able to go on the trips that I was able to go on and see what I saw, because they're what made me better.
Sure.
Because I don't even know that necessarily playing with girls would have made me as good as I was in high school or college.
Right.
You know, because guys will push you, and you're not allowed to nag, and you're not allowed to cry, and get up, that didn't hurt.
Right.
You know, because they treated me like I was one of the guys.
Right.
And I think in some respects, that was good. That was very good for me.
That was okay.
You know, so.
And how about, you know, backtracking a little bit, you sounded like you mentioned before awards through school that you had gotten for attendance and what have you, and obviously you've done scholastically very well. So it must have been something that your parents also instilled in you, that you must be able to do both. You can't do one unless you can do the other. So, you know, I'm sure those priorities were set at a very early age.
It was school, basketball, or if it was softball season, it was school, softball. You know, and mom and dad knew that if you want to have the good things, you have to work for it. I mean, there was no such thing as getting C's or D's. That wasn't acceptable, because mom and dad knew you're a pretty bright kid, so you have to put the time and the work into it. So when we would come home from school, maybe some kids were outside playing, you got your homework done, mom and dad checked it, triple checked it. Then when it was acceptable, then you go on. You know, and there was even chores in there. It wasn't like you come home from school, throw your bags down, run outside, eat dinner, don't clean up. There was cutting grass, taking out the garbage, doing dishes. I mean, all of those things. Okay. You know, as mom said, you can go play basketball all you want. Until the street light comes on, you can still shoot, but here's the things you're going to do. in order to be able to play. I mean, if we ever had a bad report card, you didn't go to practice, and that never happened. Because I loved the game so much, I wasn't going to allow myself, you know, a lot of times in high school even, if kids were going out on a Friday night and I had a big project, I actually chose to stay home and get my projects done, because if I didn't, then I might not have a good grade well enough to play or go to practice.
Right. Now let's transition a little bit. When did you move to women's basketball?
8th grade.
8th grade. Talk a little bit about that, please.
Well, I was still at Catholic school, and it's funny, Lisa Gattuso, who actually went to school here, played basketball, her dad taught in the Catholic school that I was at, but they were starting a 7th and 8th grade program at Elwood City for girls basketball. And the only reason they started this program was the gentleman who's actually the superintendent there now, he had a daughter, was very tall, especially for back then, who was a pretty good basketball player, and he wanted her to have, he didn't want her to have to wait till 9th grade. He wanted something organized for her. So they started a program, 7th and 8th grade. And they said, okay, we got this girl here playing. All right, put you and my daughter together, we might have a pretty good team. So they hired Lisa's dad as the coach, and he's like, look, come up here 1 year. I don't even remember if it was a struggle for my mom and dad or not to yank me out of Catholic school. But we did. We enrolled in Elwood City, 7th and 8th grade. I went there just for 1 year, so I only missed 1 year at Catholic school. But you had to make up for it. You had to go to CCD all the time. So it was one night a week. But 8th grade, went to Elwood City. And at the time, the Elwood City High School girls basketball team had one of the longest losing streaks in the country. They were at 59 or 60 games. They hadn't won a game in 3 or 4 years. And they were always getting blown away. I mean, the scores were ridiculous, 84-10. They were pretty bad. So they started this 7th and 8th grade program, saw that, okay, maybe we have some talent. So that at 9th grade, actually, Lisa Gattuso's dad left the junior high job and became our high school coach. So Deneen and I actually moved up with him and started playing in 9th grade. And you talk about segregation, whatever you want to call it. At Elwood City, it's not that way now, but you had a girls' gym and a boys' gym. And you weren't allowed to cross over. The girls played in this, and it was a much smaller gym. On Thursday nights, Mondays and Thursdays, and then the boys got to play in the big, nice gym with the nice locker rooms on Tuesdays and Fridays. We weren't even allowed to practice in there.
Did you resent that?
Oh, yeah. They had the nicer balls, they had the nicer uniforms, they had the nicer jump ropes, the nicer shoes, everything. But it was either you complain about it and not get anywhere, or you just deal with it and make the best of it. You know, and now it's nice to see that they play in they still have that gym. They use it for phys ed, but the girls are actually playing in the boys, well, the quote boys gym as we call it.
So the high school years were from 9th through 12th grade when you were playing on the high school team.
And that's the difference between boys basketball. For girls basketball in high school, you could play on the varsity team at 9th grade. Extremely unheard of. 9th graders never played on a varsity team. Boys, there was a 9th grade team, and then your high school was 10th, 11th, and 12th, whereas girls was 9th through 12th.
Okay, and so when this team that you first got onto, this was the team that was experiencing all the losses and the long losing streaks that they had.
And we broke that.
And so when you went in there, did you actually have an intent to change that, or did you just think that we're going to try our best and see what happens? And how did that develop over that course of the 4 years that you were in school?
Oh no, I hate to lose. I don't care if it's checkers. I don't care if I'm playing against a 10-year-old. I don't like to lose. But no, we knew right away that was a bad reputation to have. That's all you ever read in the paper. I mean, it was all you ever saw in the news. It was kind of embarrassing. So we had that mindset, well, we're going to change that. New coach, new era type thing. And I can't remember how many games we won my freshman year, but we won probably triple the games they had won over. You know, then my sophomore year, we made the playoffs. Totally unheard of. Junior year made the playoffs. The senior year made the playoffs. And we were in an extremely tough section with the Beaver Falls and the Beavers and the Newcastles. It wasn't an easy road, but yeah, we made big turnabouts.
And was that primarily due to you and your friend, the other girl that you were talking about? What's her name?
Deneen.
Deneen. Were you the stars on that team?
Oh yeah.
And then where did you get a supporting cast from? Because you can't do it all alone.
Oh no, can't do any of it alone. I think there was some kids that, you know, it was like one of those things where girls. That was probably about the time where you saw more females taking an interest in basketball. And they saw what we did our 1 year in 8th grade. and you had some kids, it was just a matter of getting them to be committed.
Okay.
Because, there were so many other things for girls to do. Boys, it was always sports. Girls, it wasn't. Well, I'm cheerleader, or I can do this, or I can do that. But then you had some kids who took an interest, saw, hey, we can win. And then, I think my freshman year, I don't remember, but we only had maybe 10 or 11 kids on a team.
Wow.
And then it kind of grew after that, and people started to take a liking to it and got interested in it. And it was the commitment level, too. You went from a team that never did anything in the summertime or in the off season,
right,
to became a real program where there was an off season, there was summer league, there was traveling around, there was going to camp and things of that nature. So I think it was just developed over a few years when you get the right coach and the right mindset of some of the players,
right,
leadership, saying, okay, come on, let's do this.
Well, you're talking about leadership. It sounds that you really assumed that role of leadership when you got in there in 9th grade and you wanted to change things. I'm assuming that you had to really take a leadership role on that team.
Yeah, I think it was just kind of handed. You know what I mean? I think it was just kind of handed to you. It was, because, I had somewhat of a reputation from the free throw shooting contest and traveling. So people would see your name and they would, oh, that's the girl that can shoot foul shots.
Okay.
But then it was the hot shot contest that they had back in the day. Well, she was winning for that. So people kind of just looked up to you as, well, how were you able to do that? And even though you were a freshman, you did have seniors looking up to you because they were used to teams that never won a game. And here comes this kid, and oh, she's not too bad. Hey, we're starting to win. So it was kind of like, instead of me looking up to a junior or senior, it was kind of like the juniors and seniors looking up to me, like, how do we do this? What do we need to do? You're pretty good. You've kind of made a name for yourself at a young age.
Okay.
Like, what do we do? So it was kind of like me taking them under my wing instead of vice versa.
Oh, okay. That's kind of interesting.
It was kind of like handed to me, actually.
Yeah.
It was almost to them, too. Sometimes we laugh. They get the ball. It was like a hot potato. They didn't, here, you take it, you shoot it. We'll get the rebound and get right back to you.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
And so as the team progressed and you started to have more success, how did that raise the prominence of girls basketball at Elwood City, and how did that compare with boys basketball programs, and did that change the acceptance between the two? Because it sounded like there was a kind of a division there between the two.
I think in a matter of a year's time, I think people started, because you would go to their games and there'd be 10 or 15 people in the stands. They didn't even have cheerleaders.
Wow.
And in a year's time, with us just winning 10 or 12 games and doing some different things, you notice the stands starting to fill up. Next thing you know, oh, we have cheerleaders. Oh, wow, we got a pep band. Not the full pep band, but we got 6 or 7 members of a pep band. Right. Had I known then what I know now about Title IX and all that, oh, I would have raised the stink, right?
Yeah, right.
But I think over a period of time, people started, and when it got to my senior year, our games were standing room only.
Really?
You had to come very early for the junior varsity game if you wanted to get a seat for the varsity game.
Wow.
I mean, our games could have been played in the big gym.
Right.
And we would have filled both sides of bleachers instead of having the one where you just had the 25 rows of bleachers on the one side and that was it.
Sure, sure.
So, yeah, it was, by the time my senior year, I remember us getting 2 pairs of shoes. I remember us having nicer uniforms. We finally had warm-up suits.
Right.
Actually, the equipment manager actually did our laundry.
Wow.
Instead of mom and dad having to do it all the time. We actually got travel bags and things of that nature. We had a great booster club, things that they never had. Incredible. So over a period of time, I guess, it's sadly enough, instead of just making it right from the get-go, it took us having to win in order to get all of those things. So when you look back on it, it's like, shame on you.
Right.
But, now it's where it should be.
Right.
Same amount of money.
And your goal was just to have some self-pride in your school and to bring that program up, and all of those other things kind of came along with that.
I wanted us to be known not for, quote, losers.
Right.
I wanted us to be respectable. I didn't want us to be the laughingstock. People wanted to play Elwood City because we were so bad. They wanted to win.
Right.
And I didn't like that, and I don't think that people that I play with like that either.
Right. Now, as you got to high school, obviously, as this program started to grow, I would think that your commitment to the game had to become even greater. You had to practice more to get to where you were.
Sure.
And I'm sure, or let me ask you, were you still doing as well academically in high school as you were?
Oh, yeah.
And so then how were you able to balance now? Was there a changing of your priorities, not so much of priorities, but time? How did you manage your time to excel at both?
It was school and basketball. All the extracurricular things that a lot of kids were doing, I didn't do. I did some, but not as much.
Okay.
Like, I wasn't robbed of a childhood or anything. It was a choice.
Choice. Right.
And I think it was when I started in the summertime going to camp, that's when you first start hearing about, if you're good enough, somebody will pay for you to go to school, but you have to work hard at it. You know, I think my sophomore year is when you started hearing, we were getting letters, which from schools, and we had no idea. We were new to this. Like, why are they sending us a letter? Why they want us to come on an official visit or non-official visit? It was always like we needed to hire somebody, because to us that lingo made no sense.
Really?
But it was one of those things where, wow, somebody will pay for me to go to school for 4 years? You know, I can go here, 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 and then it kind of clicked. Well, it's like, wow, I love this enough. Well, you're going to pay me to come play for you? Okay, what do I need to do? And I think in the summertime it was always going to camp. I can remember going to Cleveland and everywhere. Anywhere I could get to get my name out there, because scouts weren't coming to Elwood City to see us play because we weren't great. So I had to go out there to make them see me.
Okay.
And then you started getting those letters where you were getting to invitation-only camps.
Okay.
And that's how people got to see you and see your talents. And then, okay, now we're going to go to a place called Elwood City to see this kid play.
Right.
Because we saw her at camp, we like what we saw, now let's see her with her team.
Right.
So it was one of those things where, and if I wanted to go to school where I had to get A's and B's, and I had to make sure I passed the SAT, and so it was always, with me, it was always basketball, year round.
Right.
So I mean, you know, I worked with Sean Miller's dad in the summertime.
Okay.
And just continually played and traveled and went to camps and things like that. And played my junior and senior year, I played AAU ball.
Okay.
In Pittsburgh, and you talk about a challenge, because I was the only kid on the team that wasn't from Pittsburgh.
Okay.
So I was the outcast. So it was hard at first, and I knew it was hard because I was 17 years old.
Right.
But I played on a team that we traveled to Miami for the national championship.
Wow.
And that was a great experience.
Right.
But the whole time we were the outcasts, because we weren't in the know with the McConnell name and things. We weren't from Pittsburgh, and who's this kid coming from the outside?
Right.
But it paid off, because it got exposure. And I had a ridiculously crazy, psychotic, hard coach.
Yeah.
But it was well worth it.
Right.
It was well worth it.
Well, going back to the point of time when you said that the school started to receive letters, that they had never received letters before. At that time, did you, and you didn't know that basketball was the road for you.
Right.
Would you still have been choosing to go on to college after high school? Was that in the mix for you to some way, shape, or form for you to advance into higher education? Whether it would be before you even knew basketball presented that opportunity?
Oh, we were always going. I mean, from my mom and dad, whether you played sports or not, you were going to college.
You were going to college.
Because they never had the opportunity to do that. Whereas they said, look, there's opportunities for you. This is what you're going to do.
Right.
Whether you play basketball or not, you will go to college, and you will do whatever. You know, and at the time, I actually wanted to be a nurse. That changed real quickly. But yeah, oh yeah, basketball or not, I had to go to college.
So the two lessons to be learned in that are number one, recognizing when an opportunity comes along, something new that you hadn't anticipated before, these letters coming in, and number two, taking the initiative to put yourself out there, to not wait for them to come to you, for you to make sure you put yourself out there so that you can create the best opportunity for yourself.
And that's mom and dad.
And that's
mom and dad were the ones who said, well, they recognized when nobody's coming here, well, let's go over all this literature for this camp and what's going to give our daughter the best opportunity. We have a kid who has some talent. We think she can get to college and get an athletic scholarship. What can we do to help that along? So it was mom and dad sitting down and saying, well, how about this camp? And it was my dad on the phone lobbying, making calls, asking people, you've been through this for years, which is the best for my daughter, which isn't going to do her any good.
Right.
So, I mean, my dad did the legwork.
Right. And Mom did the wedding cakes.
Mom did the wedding cakes. Mom worked extra hours, you know, working night turns at Giant Eagles and things like that. So we had the money to go to camp, and Dad was on the phone. Well, I want her to be here, and I want her to be there, and I want the best for my kid.
And so how did you could see the sacrifice that
Oh, yeah, they made a lot of sacrifices.
And so your response to that sacrifice, I'm sure, had something to do with how you performed also.
Oh, absolutely. Even all the way through college, even now coaching, you know, it's always in the back of my mind, you know, make your mom and dad proud. Make sure you're setting a good example for these kids. Make sure you're doing and saying the right things. Make sure you have that work ethic that your mom and dad had, because I want people to say, wow, you know, Annie was a good coach because, or Annie was a good person because. I want, when people meet my parents, I want them to say, man, you got a great kid.
Right.
Your daughter is this, 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 and this.
Right.
Because if they don't, then I'm like, oh, I screwed up. So even when I played, I always did everything for my mom and dad to make them proud. I don't think they'd care less if I scored 2,000 points or whatever, but it made me feel better.
Sure.
You know, it did.
Sure. And so then talk about then how you came from Ellwood City to California.
Strange, because I didn't want to come here. Because, I mean, it was one of those things, too, where you really had to be smart, and that's where you have to be mature when you are 18, because we got a lot of Division I offers. I really wanted to go to Penn State and play, and I went on my official visits, and then just one day, I'll never forget, we went to the football game, met with the coach. She actually told me I was too fat. She told me I was too fat to play. I'm like, I wasn't fat for the past 2 years. How did I get so fat that I can't play for you?
Right.
Broke my heart. And then, you know, you start researching and talking to people about the difference between Division I and Division II.
Okay.
And when it really came down to it, sure, I wanted to be a Division I player, and I could have, but it was, with all of the travel, how much would my mom and dad be able to see me play? So that sacrifice that they made comes into play.
Okay.
Mom and dad sacrificed how many years, how many family vacations for me to do this. Well, why not go to a school where they will be able to see every single game I play?
Right.
Because even the Lock Havens weren't too far of a trip on a Saturday.
Right.
So when it came down to it, it was, well, what do you want to study, and how close was it to home? Because after your 4 years, you're done.
Right.
There wasn't a WNBA back then. Not that I even could have. I had my chance to go overseas and play professional, but after my 4 years, I had had enough. And when it came to Cal, it was probably when we were in the playoffs my senior year. I remember Nick Mandich showing up at a game, and the guy that was coaching our team was really good friends with him, and Nick was an assistant here.
Okay.
And he had that great personality, just down to earth, sincere. You knew that he was, as my dad would say, a BSer.
Right.
You knew where you stood with him. He was a kind of looky in the eye kind of guy.
Right.
And said, look, this is our program, this is what we're about, this is where we were. Okay, we'll come visit. We came down, there wasn't 43. You had to go all the way to the Spears exit.
Right.
You're driving down, you're like, where are we going? And Cal didn't look like it does now.
No, not at all.
Dr. Ameni wasn't here.
Right.
Paul Flores was the coach, but we came, we visited, and the offer was right, and they had the education that we wanted. So it was kind of one of those things, you know, you look at the schedule, wow, Mom and Dad, we play Clarion, IUP, Edinburgh, they're all so close to you. So it was one of you sit down and you say, I want my mom and dad to be able to see me play.
Right.
Here's where I'm going to go to school.
Right.
And it worked out. And it worked out really well.
Yeah, so it kind of, like everything, come out of the clear blue sky, huh?
Yeah, it's just
Didn't
something
really
that,
anticipate or see it coming.
I mean, I was this close to going to the University of Vermont.
Really? But and you also said something else about the education. You said the education that I wanted was here, and you mentioned earlier that you had thought you wanted to go into nursing, and at some point you changed, decided that was not for you.
No.
And when you came to Cal, you were enrolled in the elementary education program. So tell us about that decision of that career thought change.
Well, I think it was just one of those things where some of my summer jobs I worked in a daycare. And our softball coach in high school owned a daycare at home. So he's like, do you want to work? Sure. You know, I started working at the daycare and just doing that, and then being a volunteer coach for the biddy leagues, as we call them around here now.
Right.
That whole teaching aspect comes into play.
Okay.
So I liked it. It was a lot of fun. I thought, well, I'll go into it. And oddly enough, when I came to Cal to enroll in elementary education, I liked it, but it took all the way to my senior year that I actually took a semester where I didn't take any education classes, and I wanted to take communication classes.
Okay.
And I yell at my parents now, because I remember driving home to Ellwood City one day. Mom's like, what are you doing here? I'm like, is it too late to change my major? Which is something that's not uncommon now, right?
Right.
Like, Mom, I took these communication classes, and I got A's. I loved them.
Yeah.
You went to school for 4 years, you know, for education. That's what you're going to do. So I
Right.
stuck with it.
Okay.
But, and then, you know, it was easy for me, and Dr. Slutis was my advisor at the time.
Okay.
And when I was done, it was one of those things where I tried to get a job, and they said, listen, if you want, now's the time. You're one of those kids. Don't graduate, go get a job, and then try to come back to school. Get your master's now while you can.
Okay.
And it was easy for me because I got an assistantship, and I just stayed on here. I became a substitute teacher, kind of grew into the area. I just kind of liked it.
Okay.
Got my master's degree from Cal, went out, landed a teaching job for a few years, and then after I landed that teaching job, I hated it more than anything in the world.
Really?
Because I was confined to one place.
Okay.
And
That
I was
not
like,
you.
this is so not me.
No, that's
hated it.
Your whole life up till that point in time had been nothing like that.
Yeah, no, and it was one of those things where I had this, being around athletics all my life, I had this love for athletics. I'm thinking, well, what can I do
Right.
to get into athletics?
Right.
So, you know,
I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. Go ahead.
Your second degree was in special education.
And that's what I taught.
Okay, so
I think that's what burned me out.
Why did you choose special education after elementary ed?
Honestly, because that's what everybody said too.
Okay.
They said it was a fit because you'd be certified K through 12.
Okay.
I was only certified K through 8. If you're special ed, and I volunteered a ton of my time to Special Olympics, and they're like, you like it, you're patient enough, it's a fit. They don't tell you that 99% of your job is sitting down doing paperwork.
Right.
You get burned out quickly.
Right.
I hated it with a passion.
No, I don't blame you.
And I got out of it.
Yeah.
And I'm very happy that I did.
And the Special Olympics, going back to that, when and how did you get involved with Special Olympics?
We were here in Hamer one night. I was just shooting on my own. And a bunch of these kids came in with Nancy Scoble.
Okay.
And they said, you know, we're supposed to have practice. Do you mind? I'm like, no, sure. And they came in Hamer. And I'm like, what are you guys doing? And they said, well, this is Special Olympics. And Dr. Hunter and Ashley were in there. And he had come to our games, so I recognized his face from being at our games, started talking to him, and he says, hey, would you mind? We could use some help. So that one night, it was just, yeah, sure. It was the most fun I ever had.
Really?
Because those kids could care less about anything. They just had fun. They were what everybody should be. They were good sports. They didn't care if you scored or I scored.
Yep.
It was the best hour of my day. I'm like, wow, this is a lot of fun. They're like, well, if you really liked it, we're coming back on Thursday. And I'm like, okay. So I went back on Thursday, and then I just did it. And we went to the first time ever they got to go to Penn State for the state games.
Okay.
And we traveled with them, and that was probably one of the best experiences I ever had.
Really?
You talk about learning lessons, that did it.
That did it for you.
Absolutely. I mean, those kids, they love unconditionally.
Right.
They appreciate the things in life that you should.
Right.
So I just kept doing it. Then summer Special Olympics turned into winter, and I kept doing it and doing it and doing it. And then when I got involved in high school coaching, obviously it kind of was too much. I was still able to volunteer some of my time, but that group of kids that I had for those many years grew up and they were out of it.
Right.
So when they got out of it, I kind of got out of it and then just focused my attention to high school.
Well, getting back to your college days here at Cal U, who were some important influences on you while you were here, and how did they influence you? And what was, and if anything, what was really special to you about being at Cal U?
I think the influence part, I think, too, was when I first got here, Jan McConnell was the athletic director. And totally back then, right, having a female athletic director was unheard of.
Okay.
And you talk about challenges in life. You know, you're a female boss, and you have the men's basketball coach and the football coach reporting to you.
Right.
And then, you know, you're 19, 20, 21, you see that.
Okay.
You know, and the challenges that she had to face. And she handled it well, a lot of character. She was just good at what she did, didn't back down. You had to respect that as somebody, because you talk about challenges.
Right.
So when you would talk to her and see how she stood her ground, you're like, okay, this woman got a good head on her shoulders.
Right.
So I'd say she was somebody. And then the guy that recruited me was a really good guy, somebody that you could look up to, and he had everything that my parents were about.
All right.
He had a great personality, but he was very dedicated to his job. He was a very honest guy, had a lot of integrity. He was an extremely hard worker. I mean, he put his heart and soul into what he did.
Right.
So it was one of those things like, how could you not want to play for this guy?
Right.
He's very passionate about what he did. And then
you mentioned his name, and his name was
Nick Mandich.
Okay.
In fact, I think he came to our playoff game last week. He called me up, said he wanted to come down because he still lives in Washington.
Okay.
And then, you know, it kind of, oddly enough, it was weird. It was one of those things where you just click with somebody. Well, my senior year was the first time that Dr. Ameni was here in '92. And he came to one of our games, and I remember you had the hospitality room after the game, and I remember meeting him and his wife.
Right.
I'll never forget, I'm sitting on I guess it was a heater because it was a classroom, and Coach Flory's coming over to me saying, the president of the university wants to meet you. He liked the way you played. You know, sit up straight, do it. I'm like, all right, don't be embarrassed. You know, and that was the first time I met Dr. Ameni, and then, you know, the rest is history. I mean, he's probably one of the biggest supporters of what I do in our program here. So
Absolutely.
I think those three people, you know, by far,
Okay. Okay.
by the most influential people, I'd say, being here at Cal. And I think what sucks you into Cal is that family atmosphere.
Okay.
You know, even now when we bring recruits to campus, well, now you just look at it, you're like, holy cow, because it didn't look like this when I was here.
Sure.
But it's one of those things, you just tell people, don't judge a book by its cover.
Right.
Wait till you get here,
Right.
and wait till you start meeting people, and then you'll see what we're talking about. Because I could tell you about it till I'm blue in the face,
Right.
but until you get here and experience, then you'll see what I'm saying. Cal sucks you in. And I think it's the close-knit, very personable. You know, sometimes you go to a Division I school, and you have to make an appointment to see your own head coach.
Sure.
You don't get a lot of that one-on-one attention.
Right.
Here, and I think we're a lot better than a lot of our sister schools, we do spend a lot of time one-on-one with people, go out of our way, do that little bit extra. It doesn't matter if it's 4 o'clock. If it's 4:10 and you need something, I'm going to go out of my way and do it for you.
Right.
You know, that kind of thing. And I think the
Right.
family atmosphere and the close-knitness, if that's a word, is kind of what sucked me in.
Yeah,
And it brought me back to Cal.
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
And I would agree with you on that. I'm a 2-time Cal grad, and I've been an employee for 17 years, and I often talk about the Cal U family
Yep.
and the Cal U community. I've never found finer people anywhere.
No.
And as you say, if you need help at any time, people are willing to step up and help you.
Absolutely.
And I think there's a lot to be said for that.
Yeah.
And I think that regardless, as you say, in some other schools and institutions, you don't get that one-on-one. As a matter of fact, you're lucky sometimes if you can even talk to your professor, or if anyone even knows who you are.
That's right.
So I would concur with you on that one.
Yeah.
So Cal has been a good experience, and it continues to grow, and I think it has the potential to influence a lot of other people coming after us.
Oh, absolutely.
And the things that you've done to help pave the way during that, those are things that have paved the way. Just like other people have paved the way for you,
Sure.
You've been paving the way for those other people here at Cal. And let's share a little bit with the audience about your coaching experience. And what I'd like to talk about, tell us the different levels you've coached at, and maybe the different ways that you've communicated with the different ages of young ladies that you've been involved with.
Well, I've always coached high school. And when I was in grad school here, I coached at California High School, and I coached at Uniontown. But I also coached AAU basketball,
Okay.
in which we traveled all over the country playing. And
Right.
that was a great experience because that gives you a lot of experience coaching at an elite level.
Okay.
You know, because the talent's a little bit different. You in high school, you have kids that you really think want to be there, but you still have some kids that are just there because they want to belong to something.
Right.
So, you know, in high school, you're giving a 2-hour time allotment in which you try to squeeze everything in, and you have to teach the best kid as much as the kid that doesn't have as much talent. You know, you
Sure.
have to spend as much time, whereas when you're coaching AAU, it's every kid's the best kid.
Okay.
You know, so I coached high school. I coached AAU for 10 years, and then I coached high school for about 7 or 8. I coached AAU more than I coached high school. High school, I think people know this, it's disappointing because it's extremely political, and it makes it really difficult. And I'm headstrong, I'm blunt, I'm very forward.
Right.
And that was probably it was the hardest challenge was coaching high school basketball because I knew what it would take to be successful. I knew what I wanted to instill in the girls that I was coaching, but sometimes you hit that roadblock where you're not allowed to teach them what you want to teach them.
Right.
And you want to do what's right by the team,
Right.
but there's a school board or there's a principal telling you, nope, you're going to do it this way. So I probably didn't last as long as high school as I wanted to, because in high school I really wanted to make a difference with kids.
Right.
I was at Uniontown. I had a lot of kids who came from single-parent families or no-parent families.
Right.
So to me, it wasn't about teaching the game of basketball. I try to incorporate, it's about life too. A lot of things you learn playing athletics, which I think people overlook,
Sure.
you can instill in kids. It's a life lesson.
Right.
So high school was by far my biggest challenge. And I think the reason I got out of it was I couldn't handle the politics of it anymore.
Right.
I like to play the game, but I don't like to play that game.
Sure.
You know what I
Sure.
mean?
Right.
So I had to make a decision, and I got out of it. Whereas in AAU, you don't face those challenges.
Right.
It is about the game. It is about the lessons, and you can teach those.
Mm-hmm.
And then when Coach Kendall got hired here at Cal, I was still here.
Right.
And I had started the Booster Club. I noticed that the men had one and the women didn't.
Okay.
So I went to Karen and Dr. Pucci and said, I want to start a Booster Club. Why don't these girls have, like, I didn't have it. Why don't they have it? So
Right.
they told me what I needed to do. So we started that. And then I started working closely with Coach Kendall and started talking to him one day about, hey, there's this kid here, there's this kid here. And he was like, you played here. So then, and talking, he was like, well, why don't you volunteer? So that's how I got into coaching at Cal and volunteered and did a lot of stuff for them.
Right.
Would go to practice every day. Then at night, I'd be the PA announcer.
Right.
You know, then go to practice the next day. And then
Yeah.
when he left, I was involved in the hiring of Darcy.
Okay.
And then when Darcy came, it was like one of those things too, an instant click. Like you knew you had somebody good. Oh, wow, this is going to be a good, however long she's here.
Right.
And then started getting involved with her. And then I got hired as a part-time coach.
Okay.
And I've been involved here ever since. And it is night and day. You know, people will see me, do you ever want to go back to coaching high school? Oh, heck no.
No,
Never.
No.
You know, people say never. No, never.
Right.
I will never. When I'm done coaching college basketball, I will never go back to high school.
Okay.
And there's politics and everything you do.
Sure.
But, you know, you're older, more mature now. You know how to deal with it differently.
Right.
But this is it's just a whole nother life when you're coaching college basketball.
Mm-hmm.
From the backgrounds of the kids to just different challenges than you face in high school.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because college is different. The travel, the places you go.
Sure.
I'm still never amazed where basketball takes you.
Right.
What we get to see. Even we make our team now. When I say we make, we pretty much lay down a lot. You will do community service. You will give back. You know, you will do these things because you need. A lot of kids nowadays, in my opinion, I think, come into college, whether they're an athlete or not, with their hand out. Mm-hmm. What can you do for me?
Right.
That's the most frustrating thing to me as a college coach.
Right.
These kids were stars in high school, and they come here and they're like, got their hand out. In your 4 years, that's going to change. So when
Okay.
you, like Brooke Williams is a great example. She's an All-American on our team. This was her senior year.
Okay.
When she came, she was one of those kids from Pittsburgh who was a stud, as we like to say.
Mm-hmm.
And then she came in thinking, well, do that for me.
Right.
Why aren't you making my schedule? Or, oh, what are you talking about? You know,
Right.
you why I'm making your schedule. You can make your own schedule.
Right.
Well, that's what people. No, that's not what people do.
No.
And from the time, talk about a transformation. From the time my kid was a freshman till now, she went from being a kid to a woman.
Really?
And that's something that we're proud to say we had a hand in between Darcy and Mark and our coaching staff. And that's something that we take a lot of pride in. She's a 3-5 student. She's an All-American on a basketball floor. She does give back to the community as a kid, and I think she will. And when you talk to her, her overall experience as Cal is something that we wanted. Like, I had such a great experience here,
Right.
and I want to make sure any kid that comes through has that same experience I do. I want them talking about Cal 10, 15 years from now.
Sure.
You know,
sure.
I want her to say, Annie, I got a really good player for you, and I want her to come to Cal because my experience was good.
Right.
So, and you can do that at the college level.
Right. Okay.
You
so
know,
you can
so-
have a different kind of an impact, a much
Absolutely.
greater individual impact on an individual.
Sure.
They're more willing and open to listen to that. And particularly, you set the standard before that. You set a bar. They know, as just when you were shooting the free throws years ago, that people saw you as a leader, so they were willing to come on board. Well, they've seen what you've done at Cal, and again, in all respects, not just playing basketball, your involvement with committees and communities and the initiative that you've taken. When I look at your resume and I look at the number of committees you had listed, 6, I'm sure you've probably been on more,
Yeah.
but what was really stuck out in my mind on that, out of the 6, you were either the co-chair or the president of 4 of those 6.
Mm-hmm.
So you seem to always gravitate towards that leadership role because of your competitive nature.
You can call me a control freak. That might be what it is.
control
I might be
freak.
obsessive compulsive. I have to. Well, and I think it's just one of those things too. Like if somebody asks me, I always get that. Why do you do so much? Don't you know how to say no? I'm like, well, if somebody asks me, you know, and then it's one of those things where, okay, I'll try it. And then
Right.
you go to a meeting, and next thing you know, oh, this is pretty interesting.
Right.
And then I'm one of those people, it's funny, it's like an extreme, it's like all or nothing.
Right.
If I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it all out, head on fire, or I'm not going to do it at all. There isn't any in between for me.
Right.
And that comes from being an athlete, I think.
Sure,
I
sure.
want to do it right. I really want to do it right. So, you know, that's why I don't mind responsibility.
Right.
Because sometimes when you get on a committee like
That's
that, you
a good
take it as a
point.
challenge.
That's right.
You know, like I was telling you before we came on about our golf committee.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, somebody had asked me if I'd get into the fundraising world. Never thought I'd be into it, but it's with athletics. It gets, you know, we raise money for our students to be able to come to school and play basketball or football, whatever.
Right.
I'm the only female.
Right.
I'm talking about a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, my boss had said, well, I want to make you a co-chair of this. You know, and what do you mean a co-chair? What's that involved? Well, here's your goal. This is what you have to raise. This is what we have to do. This is how many foursomes we have to have. This is what we need to do.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you put me in charge of that. I said yes. Well, it's my name attached to that.
Right.
So just like anything, if my name's attached to that, I want people to say, wow, this is a great event.
Right.
Because my name's attached to it.
Right.
Then
right.
once you do it and you do it well, you're stuck with it. They're not taking that now.
Right, no,
Unless
no,
I
that's
retire, that's not being taken away.
That's right.
But, you know, it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah. Well, another interesting aspect, you talked about your love of communications, and then you somehow got involved with being the PA, the public
Yeah.
address announcer for the sports here at CalU. Share with us how that came about and how you were accepted as a female sports announcer.
Yeah, that was, well, actually, when Dave Smith used to be the public address announcer
Right.
for a lot of the sports.
Right.
Well, then he became our sports information director.
Right.
So it was too much of a conflict. He couldn't be at an event doing it. So they were looking, they said, well, let's start with, they were really having a hard time finding anybody to do it. So they asked me, well, I knew the game. I had no idea what I was doing, but it just came to me. It was one of those things, I just sat down at a game, got the microphone, and your personality comes through, because you have to have a personality to do that.
Right.
So I did the women's games, and then Coach Brown said, why don't you do our games? Oh, if you don't mind, I don't mind. Me, didn't mind at all. So I started doing the men's and the women's games.
Okay.
Coach Brown came up one day and said, you know, Bud, there's no other woman in the country that does a men's game. Well, yeah, and then Mike Kolakowski was here.
Okay.
And he's like, well, Dave did football. Annie, you have a great, do football. And then I started doing the football games. I think it was Bruce Wald that said, Stud, there's no woman that does football in the country. I'm like, yeah, well, I didn't look at it like I had fun doing it.
Right,
and
right.
people were coming in, is that a woman up there? This is great. You have a woman doing men's sports.
Yeah.
And I just did it. I loved it though.
Right.
I just kind of stuck with it. I looked forward to doing it. It was a lot of fun.
Right.
It kept me involved with athletics.
Sure.
Got me into doing a lot more things, but it was pure enjoyment.
Right.
But then, like now I still do softball because it doesn't conflict with basketball.
Sure.
And this year I did a few of the men's basketball games when the regular guy couldn't do it.
Okay.
But you know, somebody else does ours now. But I still, baseball doesn't play here anymore, so I can't do baseball. And when Coach Luckhard came, they had somebody else in mind. So I kind of got out of doing the football public address announcing, but I still do. Still have my hands in it.
Right.
I always said one day I wanted to boot the guy off the Steelers and do that.
There you go.
I did. I'd still like to.
I was just going to say.
He's kind of old, I think.
You still have a goal there.
I do have a
You
goal.
do.
I think they have somebody in mind, though.
Hey,
Talk about politics.
You never knew before where you'd get to be, and you know, it's
someday I might meet the right
you're
people.
competitive enough that again, if that opportunity were there, you would recognize it.
I think it'd be great.
And I know you would take the initiative to do that.
Yeah, I think it'd be great.
Yeah, and I think that's certainly a statement of your legacy here at CalU. And by the way, what do you consider? Do you feel that you have a legacy here at CalU?
Not yet. Not yet. In fact, we talked about that. What was it, 2 years ago now, when I got that Loyalty and Service Award from the alumni office.
Right.
I even said in my speech, you know, it's about, you know, giving back. And to me, you know, at some point, I mean, I'm still kind of young. Financially, you might not be able to give back as much as you want, but to me at this point, it's about giving back my time. And I think my legacy at some point, because I'll retire from Cal. Unless I get fired someday, you never know, but I hope not. I'll retire from Cal, and I think I want my legacy to be a person who was giving, not necessarily always financially, but giving of their time.
Right.
And always was the person who went out of their way to do for others. That golden rule, do unto others as you want done to you.
Right.
I think that's something great to live by. That's what my parents lived by. That's what I want to live by.
Right.
So I think kind of that's how I want my legacy to be. And I think I have a long road to fulfill that yet.
Do you have a message that you would like to send to future generations of CalU students and other women in general?
Well, I think just to women in general, because I still think even though it is 2010, believe it or not, there are still, unfortunately, there are gender equity issues still. And I think it's one of those things where you could be one of those people when you're faced with a challenge of complaining about it but not doing anything about it, or you can somewhat complain about it. I don't want to say complain, bring it to light and try to make a difference, like make change in a good way. Okay. Like there's still a lot of things I see in my life that might not be right, or it shouldn't be that way, it should be this way. So I would tell somebody, don't just sit back and wait for somebody else to do it yourself.
Right.
And you could take heat for it, and you might take heat for it, but isn't it worth it if you affect the change for the better? Right. And that's what that's what we tell our kids now, and that's what I would continue to tell, I mean, women certainly, but even guys. Right. You know, because you could have the reverse gender equity as well.
Absolutely.
But yeah, that's what I would say. Make a difference. Like I try to spend my life making a difference in some way, shape, or form. Right, right. And I would tell anybody to try to do that.
That's an outstanding.
Be persistent.
Be persistent.
You have to be.
There's a lot to be said for persistency, isn't there?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One of the, last year at our banquet, Lindsey Johnson, probably one of the biggest compliments she could have given me was the kids bought the coaches something. And the one thing that the kids bought me last year was 2 plaques about determination and persistence. Right. And I have them displayed in my locker now because to me that's probably one of the best compliments somebody could give me.
Right. I believe I have a quote from Calvin Coolidge, and I can't give you that exact quote right now, but it talks about the world being full of geniuses, the world being full of idiots, the world being full of this, but it said that there is no substitute for persistence. Right. Persistence will win out overall all the time. So I think your message is timeless, and I think that the values that you've espoused by everything that you've done here at Cal have shown that, have demonstrated that, have validated that is a good path to take. And I think that certainly your accomplishment, you are a woman of accomplishment, and we are happy to have you here at Cal. And let me ask you if there is any parting thing that you would like to say that I haven't asked you about that you would like to bring up.
No, I don't think so. I just think, people, when Cal's a good place. I think this, when somebody asked me to do this project, it was a no-brainer for me.
Right.
To do this, whether I was friends with the people who were doing it or not. I think it's good to get the message out there to people. And I have my greatest memories of life, even from high school. My best memories are from Cal. My greatest friendships, my best friends have all come from Cal. And it's one of those things, anywhere you go in life, no matter where you work or what you do, there's always something that people don't like. You can always find a gripe about something.
Sure.
But I found that being here, I have far more positive things than I do gripes.
Right.
That's probably the one thing that keeps me coming back every day. And I'm one of those people, when Monday morning at 5:30 rolls around, I get up, I'm not, oh man, I got to go to work. I love coming to work.
Right.
So I think that says a lot about Cal and the people who are here.
Right, right. I've often said I've never worked a day since I got hired at Cal.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's an enjoyable place to come to.
And I would like to say now you can add to your list of firsts as the first woman to participate in the Women of CalU's Women of Accomplishment,
Yeah.
an oral history project.
Good.
And we're glad that you're that person. We feel that you exemplify many of the virtues and things that are good about Cal.
Thanks.
And on behalf of California University, the Women's Studies and the Women's Center and the Peace Project and the Library of Congress Center for Oral History, we thank you for all that you've done and thank you for what you will continue to do for Cal. And I would just like to say that I've been privileged to have you as a colleague and a friend, and I feel privileged to have shared this time with you. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. You're very welcome. Thank
All right.
you.